The Red Army is probably one of the most talked about things in the EDDSWORLD fan base. Basically, if you've been in the fandom, you've probably heard about it. Tom is of course another fan favorite among fans, and being one of the main trio to this day, his popularity is only growing. But of course, I don't think anything will be as popular as the topic of the Red Army. The Red Leader. Tord, in general. Now here we have to ask ourselves, why is Tord, the Red Army, and Tom so important together? Well, today, lads, I'm going to explain to you, in my humble opinion, why I think Tom from EDDSWORLD knew not only about Tord's lab, but also the Red Army the entire time. I'm going to show you all a bit of evidence that I've gathered that might just help out with my theory, and maybe help you rethink what you thought you knew about Tom. So we'll start with what I think is the most far-fetched evidence I have, so we'll start with it first. We're going to be looking at the tanks, specifically the ones in the Snogger and the end part 1. Now to understand this section, we have to remember the layout of the EDDSWORLD household. Ed's room is on the side of the house. This will be brought up later, so try and remember this. Let's look at the Snogger first. At the end of the Snogger, we see Tom pull a tank out of the house. Of course, this could just be a silly little gag they did for a bit of ha-ha moment, a bit of a ha-ha funny joke, but we're here to do theories, not jokes. So, let's look at the number on the tank. CDT-01. This number will come up in just a bit. Now we have this tank number, let's look at the number on the tank in the end. Once Ed and Matt find out about Tord's lab, they of course, like any good friend would do, start pushing buttons. One of the first things we see once they start pushing the buttons is a tank emerge from Ed's bedroom. The tank reads CDT-0. Now we can't see what the final number says, but I think it's safe to say it's probably a 1. Now, let's look back at the Snogger for a second. How did Tom get this tank? I mean, it's in Ed's bedroom. Now, we could just say he's probably the one from Space Cats or Movie Makers, but let's be honest. You really think they have 3 tanks lying around their house? I think it's safe to say that it's very likely Tom got this tank from Ed's room. But how did he get this tank? I mean, the only way to get it is through the lab, so if Tom didn't know about the lab, how did he even get the tank out of the house to begin with? For this one, we'll be looking back at when Tord left and Tom took over his room. Now in the end, when Tord goes to reopen his lab, he pulls a photo off the wall, which was covering another picture, which was also hiding the real lever to open his lab. Now let's take a closer look at this picture. As we can see, it's been drawn on. Now, before you say anything, I can already hear you all commenting. But couldn't Tom have just drawn on the glass to the picture? I mean, wouldn't that make way more sense than having to take the picture off the wall and then take the picture out of the frame and then draw on it and hang it back up on the wall? Now, to that I have to say, shut up. Who in their right mind keeps a photo on the wall to draw on the glass? Not only is that angle uncomfortable, but I'm also pretty sure Tom's not that dumb. It's way more likely that Tom would have taken the photo off the wall, found the hidden photo and the lever, and found the lab. Now, you might also be saying, well, why didn't he tell Ed or Matt, or even Tord? Well, as we can see in the end, Ed and Matt cannot be trusted in the lab, and Tom knows this. So, why would he tell them? It's more likely Tom had found the lab and decided to keep it to himself, not even telling Tord, and feared that he'd come back and take everything from it. Let's look at the lab again. We're going to fast forward to the end part 2, specifically near the end. Here we see Tom pull a wanted poster off the shop window. Of course, it's Tord, the Red Leader, wanted, dead or alive. Now, immediately after saying this, Tom runs back to home, to his room, to the lab. How did he know where Tord was, and why didn't he question anything about the lab like Ed and Matt did? Why didn't Tord explain anything to Tom, like he did with Ed and Matt? I mean, Tom is the smartest one in the group. He could easily call the cops right now, or even kill him if he wanted to. Now, let's look at the background for the lab. We can clearly see blueprints on the wall. On these blueprints, we can clearly see a drawing of what looks like Tom in the monster form he takes on in Power. Is it possible Tord had experimented on Tom in the past? Maybe even erased his mind with the memory eraser we see in the end? I mean, it's not that far-fetched, and it is a possibility. What the Future is probably one of, if not the most popular episode in episode history. But it also contains the final thing we need to complete this theory. Once Tom and Matt exit the portal to the past, Tom says a line that makes this theory complete. Let's listen closely now.
Huh. It's a good job Red Leader had a second time travel device.
Here, Tom name drops the Red Leader, which we know now, of course, is Tord. Now let's break down this scene real quick. According to Tom, him and Matt got this time travel device from the Red Leader himself, the leader of an army that was strong enough to take over the entire world and outlaw Coca-Cola entirely as a drug. Now, why would Tord give someone he's known to hate a time travel device? A device that could easily be used to destroy everything he's worked for. An army, followers, and world control. Well, the answer is simple. Tom trusts the Red Leader. His leader. Tom follows the Red Leader and wouldn't dare to destroy what he's worked for. As I close out this video, I'd like you all to take this video with a grain of salt. This is, as I said in the beginning, just my opinion on all the evidence that I've gathered. If you have a different opinion than mine, that's perfectly fine, and I'd love to hear it. But until we can get some confirmation from one of the creators, or even a continuation with the future, this will remain what it is. Just a theory.
A film theory and cut.